Welcome. In this episode, I interview Vivek Kumar and Jim Daly from Microsoft on the Microsoft Docs portal and find out how those docs can help you. This is a Dynamics 365 show focusing on the ingredients of a successful Dynamics 365 practice. Your host is Business Applications MVP Mark Smith, otherwise known as NZ365 Guy. I love engaging with the community, so send me a message on Twitter or LinkedIn by searching for NZ365 Guy. To review the show notes for this episode, please go to nz365guy.com/50. Also, it is worth noting that at the end of 2018, this podcast is moving to its own channel. It'll no longer be available on crm.audio, but will be available as the Microsoft Business Applications podcast. You can find it on any great podcast player. I'd like to thank the generous contribution from our sponsor, Kingswaysoft. Kingswaysoft is a leading integration solution provider offering software solutions that make data integration affordable and painlessly easy. Thousands of enterprise clients from over 80 countries and regions rely on Kingswaysoft to integrate data with various business systems in order to drive their business efficiency and fully leverage their information assets. And Kingswaysoft now works with CDS and Power Apps. Kingswaysoft is a leading provider of Microsoft Dynamics integration software, including Dynamics 365, CRM, AX, NAV, GP, SL, as well as many other applications. Hi everyone, welcome to the Dynamics 365 Practice Podcast. I'm here today with Jim Daly and Vivek Kumar. Guys, welcome to the show.
Glad to be here.
Thank you.
Hi Jim, first let's start with you. Do you want to kind of share with the audience a little about your career journey and how you kind of ended up in Microsoft?
Sure. I'll give you the short version. I kind of got started a little bit after I was 30, so I was a little late to getting into IT, but I joined about 20 years ago. I joined a CRM vendor and started in technical support, helping people with stored procedures and programming level stuff. Did that for a couple of years and moved over to their training group. Did that for about a year, and then I had the opportunity, unwanted, but opportunity to leave that company and work for one of their customers and spend about a year doing a re-implementation of their CRM software on site with a very IT-driven.
So was that a Dynamics back then, or was it some other type of CRM?
It was a company called Onyx. I think they're still around, but probably in maintenance mode. But that was a great first start. At that point, I heard that Microsoft was going to have a CRM product, and I thought, hey, I'd like to get in on that. And because of my training background, I got a job as a trainer. I was going to be doing training for the very first version of product, and we actually did the training for like the beta of V1. And then we realized, well, if we're going to teach, we need content. So we ended up writing content for this courseware. And so I handled the customization configuration part, which also included creating test questions for the certification exams. And this is all a very new product. And it was the first, .NET product. I think it was the first product that Microsoft shipped that used .NET, just to give you an idea of how old it was. And I would say that the version 1 and early versions of products were short of capabilities to meet requirements, and the answer I kept getting at that point was, oh, well, use the SDK, you can code that. So I had to learn .NET, and I worked on a training course for developers back then. And then I wanted to, this was all while I was working in Fargo. I moved to the Seattle area, went out to Fargo, lived there for a couple of years. So I kind of wanted to get back home, and I came back and I started with the content team for version 4, writing content at that time. It was the inline help for the customization area. Then I joined the SDK team for V5. I did form scripting solutions, metadata API, ribbon, a lot of client-side stuff. And as I had an opportunity to manage the developer documentation team for a couple of years. And then last July, I moved over into a PM role.
Well, so let me get this right. Did you write the original courseware for CRM like 1.2?
For the customization and configuration content, yeah.
Oh man, I never knew that. Thank you so much, because it was really well written, as in that's when I started. And I tell you, the courseware back then was absolutely top notch. So good job.
Thanks.
Didn't realize that. So Vivek, what about you? What's your journey into Microsoft and your career thus far?
Right. So I am a mathematics graduate and I started my career as a technical writer. I did not originally go for that interview. I actually went for a software developer role, but they thought I kind of lacked on my practical skills. So they offered me to do documentation, and this was not Microsoft. So I started my journey as a technical writer accidentally, and then I started liking that part because I got used to work with developers, program managers, and other folks and learn new technologies every day and write about it, and customers used to give feedback, and that really made me happy, and that way my journey started. After I started as a technical writer, it took me like 6-7 years to come and join Microsoft. I started with the BizTalk adapter team, and I was doing documentation for Oracle e-business suite SQL database adapters, and then kind of started liking SQL database, got deep into that area. And then in India, I got an opportunity to join the CRM documentation team as a vendor. And I did start documentation on appointments, recurring appointments, SharePoint integration, developer documentation. Worked on it for 2 years and then moved to the SQL database Azure documentation team right there in India. Worked there for around three and a half years, and then again got an opportunity to move to US and joined the CRM SDK developer documentation team. Joined back here, worked on a variety of stuff, USD, XRM tooling. Very recently, overhauled the client scripting documentation. And right now, I'm working as a content publishing manager, managing a documentation for Power Apps, Flow, and Dynamics 365 platform. After Jim left our team, I took on this role and kind of trying to make sure that we can properly migrate Dynamics 365 documentation into the Power Apps world, so that people who are coming onto the Power Apps and using our platform, which is now called CDS for Apps, easily and they can find content and do their job.
Excellent. So just to get this right, you both worked in Docs. Jim, you've had a history working in Docs and recently moved roles. And Vivek, you're now running the Microsoft Docs team for everything that kind of sits under business applications. Would that be right?
Not everything, but basically the core platform part of Dynamics 365 and Power Apps and Flow.
Okay. So can you tell me a bit about, just some numbers and stats around the move? So how long ago did kind of Microsoft Docs come online from a Dynamics perspective, and kind of what did it replace? And my understanding it's the main source now to find out kind of anything and everything. Can you tell us a bit about that journey and how it happened?
Right. So I'll start first, and Jim, you can add. So earlier we had this documentation split across various websites. MSDN typically for developer documentation, TechNet typically for IT Pro, end user documentation, and then Office had their own site called support.office.com, or Windows had their own site called support.windows.com typically for end user documentation. Now that was creating a lot of friction, confusion amongst users when they were made to jump from one site to another for related documentation. What Microsoft said, let's consolidate all this into a single branding, into a single website where people can find all types of information irrespective of the user persona. And then this idea of docs.microsoft.com came up. They also wanted to move to a more contemporary style of documentation where they could invite community participation, more robust feedback, and more importantly, people can just basically contribute to our docs so that we could use the community knowledge to increase the value of our content. So at that point, this whole docs thing came up based on a GitHub platform where it allows you to participate by creating pull requests with your changes, provide feedback that is tracked using GitHub issues, and is an open source thing. So that's when it came out. For Dynamics 365 documentation, we moved to Docs roughly 2 years back, and now you'll see if you have your old MSDN links bookmarked, if you click on those links, they will actually be redirected to the previous version docs.microsoft.com. So we have actually moved almost all of our stuff to docs.microsoft.com.
So what type of areas haven't been moved yet, just at a broad level?
I think everything is moved now.
Everything is? Yeah.
Yeah, I'd add, one of the differences, and Vivek touched on this, is, when we worked on MSDN and TechNet, one of the things that the output of that was that we create the compiled help file, for example, that we ship in the SDK package. But the thing is, it was written using a set of proprietary tools where, you had sort of a Word-looking interface, but underneath it was all XML. And one of the outputs of that, it was really a content management system, is that it would allow, you could build a CHM or you could push the changes out to MSDN or TechNet, depending on your publishing thing. And the thing is, those tools, while they required some additional training for people to use, and it was difficult for, say, PMs or devs to contribute it. They had to go through one of the writers and say, hey, can you update this doc? And then they'd have to, convey the meaning and the greater, and, why is this change being applied? And it was up to the writer to process that and get it into words. And, different iterations and review was always difficult. So, while the GitHub system isn't a content management system per se, in that it's hard to say run the same kind of reports and do some of the same things you can do with a real content management system, it does use the open tooling and Markdown as the means of writing the content. Is not easy is very easy to learn and adapt. And so a lot of people already know it. So it's going to bring in a lot more people to participate directly with the docs in a much more efficient way.
Nice. I think the last time I accessed a CHM file was around USD. USD used to have or Unified Service Desk used to have a lot of when it first came out, USD, I think there was a lot of, in fact, I was going back to the old ones to learn about the various languages and stuff used as part of USD and creating scripts, etc., and even connections to telephony systems were all in those old CHM files.
Yep, that's correct.
Has that all moved across now?
Yes, it's all now on docs.microsoft.com.
Yeah, fantastic. So in the old days, we used to have the software development kit or the SDK. Where is that now? Does it exist, or is it 100% all docs now?
I'll cover that one, Vivek, if that's all right.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yes, since CRM began, there was a downloadable package, a zip file that included the compiled help content, the SDK assemblies, tools, and sample code. So it was all very convenient in a single package. And, this made a lot of sense back when we released new things every couple years. We would do periodic updates. There wasn't a whole lot of change. As change became more frequent, assembling and packaging and posting this package could easily require, a week for several people to work together on. And we were getting to the point where we would be spending so much time reviewing, fixing, building, and just shipping that package that we had no time to write. So I think the key change is when we started shipping the SDK assemblies on NuGet, which, for people who were using Visual Studio, much easier way of adding assemblies. So adding the SDK assemblies wasn't really necessary to ship them separately. The publishing system changed and no longer created CHM files for us. So that was a reason not to include the CHM anymore. And by the time we worked out and we also moved the sample code over to code.msdn.microsoft.com, so it would be discoverable via internet search. So there just wasn't much, there was a lot of redundant effort. And with the resources we had, we decided to stop shipping that package as it was.
No, that totally makes sense.
Yeah.
And just to add to that, it's now available, everything is available online, and all the assemblies are available through NuGet packages. Visual Studio has now inbuilt support for NuGet package manager, so that makes it all the more easier to just get those assemblies through NuGet packages. So
yeah, and I take it there's just no guessing that, am I on the latest version? As long as you've, requested the latest copy, you've got the latest one, right?
Yep.
Yeah. The thing that's still a little kludgy, I'm hoping that we can get fixed over time, is that, the tools that are distributed via NuGet. We do have a PowerShell script that we include in there, and thanks to David Yak for publishing the early version of that, but we modified it a bit. And, it does require a little step of at the command line in PowerShell to download the latest version. I'd like to get that somehow to be better in the future, but it's all available, and you can always get the latest version that way.
Excellent. Is there anything stopping one of the community members kind of developing it any further, or does it really need to be done in-house, this piece?
We've had some discussions about the best way to do that, but there isn't any work committed. I know that David, his XRM Tools site, has a nice way of downloading it through the UI from NuGet. And we're still having discussions about the best way we want to do that going forward.
No, he's a good operator. How has Microsoft kind of developed over time, specifically Microsoft Docs developed over time, as in the last 2 years, so since about 2006, I think, when you went live? How have you made any changes, made any improvements in the way Docs are distributed or anything, or are you pretty much just, you're just still on what you started with?
So I'll take that. So earlier we had a partnership with Adobe to gather feedback on our docs, and then recently they enabled support for GitHub issues to gather feedback. So every time you raise a feedback on any of the page, it actually gets created as a GitHub issue. Then anybody can just track it, basically, can see what's happening there. So that's one good thing. What we also ended up doing within our team is that we kind of put up automation in place that every time a GitHub issue is created, that software code actually looks at who created that topic and automatically assigns that GitHub issue to that person and sends an email to them. So that way the person is aware that, hey, a GitHub issue was created on my topic and I have an action item to do. We are also planning to enhance that process by doing some triaging and assigning some labels to those GitHub issues, so that many a times we get product feedback saying that, hey, we have the performance issue. First time I ran a web API, it took me 20 seconds, but from thereafter it just takes me 2 seconds. So those kind of issues are not essentially content issues. They are like product issues, so we can label them appropriately. Sometimes we get localization feedback. Sometimes there is trash. Sometimes we just get kudos, which are not actionable, basically. So we're trying to kind of filter all that through the new triage process that we are in the process of implementing. Also, our repo creation and management process has become simplified over the period of time. Now we can create a repo as soon as 5 minutes. Earlier we had to go and reach out to our infrastructure team, request for repo creation. That used to take 2-3 days, and that kind of delayed our process. So we are making a lot of progress in that area. Also, the search capabilities are increasing, and we now see good SEO results when you search on Google and Bing. I mean, you can find your topics easily on docs.microsoft.com. So those are some of the enhancements that have happened in the last 2 years.
Yeah, and I guess I would add on that is, as a product within Microsoft, we've always been dependent on the greater publishing, whether it was MSDN or TechNet. I mean, there are groups within Microsoft that facilitate all the products in publishing their content. And so, it's not like we can build something from scratch. We're aligning to whatever features the publishing platform team makes available to us. So as they add new things, then we can join in, And I know that they've got a number of different initiatives, to continually improve that. I think it was interesting to sort of see how the Docs publishing platform originated, because I'm not expert in that, but just observing, you can see a lot of that came out of the Azure team. They were the first ones to really create a publishing platform that used GitHub and sort of spurned using MSDN and TechNet. And, Scott Guthrie was a big driver for that, and it indicates, I understand he's a strong advocate for the documentation, because there's a correlation between the satisfaction that people have with the docs and the product. And so it takes a long time for things to sort of come together in a big organization like Microsoft. I think it's pretty fascinating that the infrastructure that's built is all built on this underlying open source technology called DocFX. And so we've had product feature teams who often will spin up their own internal wiki or type thing, and they can take that DocFX technology associated with a GitHub repo and build their own, essentially almost the same type of thing for their internal use. So it's pretty cool.
That is cool. So just tell me about who Docs are specifically aimed at in the Dynamics community. Are they aimed at consultants, end users, developers, admins, DevOps? Kind of what's the focus?
So I'll go first, Chip, and then you can jump in. So it's basically for all kinds of users. We typically divide our users into 3 or 4 personas. So we have an end user who's basically using the apps, doing things. They already have a system set up for themselves. They're just doing like creating cases, listening to customers. So those are the end user types. The second ones are basically the customizers who basically use the GUI to set up the system without writing much code. I would say just limit to PowerShell or something. The third is admin, who is basically managing your instances, taking care of your requests, going and fixing things for you. Again, he's just limited to using the GUI. And the fourth kind are the developers / ISVs, basically, who are like pro developers. They know how to use code, can go deep into the area and do a bunch of customization and extensions. So four user personas we try to handle. And then somebody who's a solution architect, he has to wear different kinds of hats at different point of time. When he's kind of designing the system, he's a customizer / developer, but when he's testing the system, he becomes more like an end user kind of person to test it out. So that's what we deal with.
Okay, so what if I find a mistake, or one of our audience here finds a mistake in Docs? What's the best way to report that back through to your team?
Right. So every Docs topic has a feedback section at the bottom of the topic, and that feedback is divided into 2 areas. One is the product feedback, the other one is the content feedback. You would need a GitHub ID to report the content feedback. So once you click on that, it will ask you for your GitHub login password. You just sign in and you can provide the feedback. As I told you earlier, we have an automation running. Every time you create a feedback, that feedback is automatically assigned to the person who wrote that topic, whether it's a PM or a writer or a developer. And then they have some time to look onto that. As content folks, we typically go and triage those GitHub issues. And if an issue has been lying there for more than 5 days or like a week or so, we start pinging the author saying, hey, did you get a chance to look at this feedback? Can I help you with something? And that's the way they interact with you.
So there is an interaction that goes on. So if I reported something, you're going to notify me that it was either solved at some point, or thank you very much just for reporting it?
Yes.
Well, yeah, I mean, it depends. And, just a few minutes ago, I had one where a guy said, hey, I was trying to do this operation, and here's my stack trace. And I said, well, thank you. If you have some information about how you'd like the content to be changed, please let us know. Otherwise, you need to contact support or go to the forums. And I closed that very quickly. So, I hope that won't spend a whole lot of time if it isn't focused on some specific content change. If you say the content's not accurate, or you say the content is hard to understand, or anything that we can do to make the content better, we can derive those. Otherwise, if it's a feature request, for example, the product feedback will take you there. Now, I guess I wanted to touch on this a little bit because, Mark, you might remember back when we had the chums, and even on MSDN, we used to publish an email alias. So we had a doc feedback alias people could click. It was a mail to link, and we get an email to a shared alias, and then we'd read those. And I loved that. I mean, I thought it was fantastic that someone could give you maybe some cryptic thing, and you could reach out to them and go, do you mean this or this? Because if we can't convert this into something actionable, we're not psychic, so it takes a little time to parse through. But when you can reach out to folks to say and have a dialogue, that helps us resolve it, helps us make sure we're making the right change. And that's where the GitHub issues allow us to have that back and forth, and hopefully not too many questions. We're not going to ask you to run a bunch of scripts on your environment or anything, but get down to the heart of the issue as fast as we can.
No, that makes sense. And so what's very clear is that Docs is not a support environment. There's a proper support channels for that. Docs is about documenting how to use the technology, where to find stuff if you need to, code samples, or linking off to where they are available on GitHub and things like that, or NuGet. It's definitely not a support environment, correct?
That's correct.
Yeah, fantastic. So how do you handle kind of name changes to, at the moment we're seeing a lot of name changes with, from Dynamics 365, Power Apps, Power Platform, things like this. And one of the ones that have just come up recently is Solutions. are now going to be called projects, although we've kind of, some of my colleagues in the MVP space have reported rollbacks, and one day it's called projects and then it's solutions, and it's stuck on solutions at the moment. How does it affect you from a documentation perspective, as in making sure that is it just a pure find and replace? But what happens to the people that for the last 15 years have been calling it solutions, and they're still going to, if you like, search for the word solutions and don't realize it's changed to projects? How do you handle it?
So I just wanted to tell you that the rename from solutions to projects has been put on hold indefinitely. Yes, I mean, I raised a big hue and cry about this because it was like a major change to this, and then thankfully it was rolled back. But if anytime there is a thing like this, that features like this happens, what we typically do is this Docs has this great functionality of setting redirects. So if yesterday a feature was called what is solution, and we renamed that to call what is a project, we actually set a rename for what is a solution and then redirect it to what is a project. So even if you search for what is a solution, it leads you to a cached site, but the moment you click there, you will be redirected to something called what is a project. The first line will obviously say solutions are now called projects. Again, I'm using this as a wrong example, but feature A is now called feature B, and now this works like this. So that's the first weapon of defense we have. Typically, there is a blog out as well on the CRM team side, basically announcing the feature change, name change, and all. So, I mean, those are the two ways typically we try to handle that. And then obviously MVP community and other folks in the community help us spread that word, and that is really helpful to us. So thank you for being the excellent ambassadors for our product.
One of the other things that I guess tying into that, and I don't know if a lot of people have noticed this yet, but when we became a Power Apps platform, and we've been in the process for more than about a year now of moving our content over to a new repo, a new URL that's under Power Apps. And so whereas in the past we had the Dynamics 365 customer engagement product, which had a web application, and it had a platform, we have had to separate those things and to move them into one category being model apps, which will include all your form scripting and things. We've moved the platform into the common data service for apps. So these things were all written over the course of 15 years, and they were written to describe a unified product. And so we've been spending quite a lot of time, separating those things out into two separate buckets in a logical way. And, in addition, the content about workflow is now under the Flow site. So at the same time, there's a lot of content still under Dynamics 365. So we're kind of in a state right now where we've got duplicate content depending on where you go. So in the next several months, or I don't know how long it'll take, but we've got to reconcile that so that we're not having to do double entry in both places. So these changes to whether it's the name of a feature or the whole name of the suite of products has a huge amount of document impact. A lot of work has to be done to align the docs with those kind of changes.
Mm-hmm. So you're not saying, I'm just going to clarify if I pick this up. Do you think that then, in the fullness of time, Dynamics 365 documentation will be superseded by Power Apps documentation? As in those two those two, they're both doc sites, but will one ultimately become the master data, if you like, the master source of truth, and the other one, as the content's migrated across, will then become obsolete?
I think yes, going forward, but I cannot speak much about that, obviously, owing to, we still don't have product directions to talk about it publicly, but... Makes
sense. Okay, so that's cool. Anything else, Jim?
Yeah, I mean, we want people, the discovery when people look for our stuff, it's best if it's in one place, so...
Yeah, totally makes sense. And the whole direction of, the Dynamics apps, if you like, the first-party apps are one thing, and the Power Platform is something quite different, even though it supports, if you like, that whole environment. It makes sense to kind of make that transition. So yeah, very good, very good. So tell me about telemetry. What's what telemetry kind of do you have running to understand, what docs are becoming, how would you say, stale maybe, or basically not searched for? And then what about key phrases that are searched for, but people are not really finding content? Do you run any telemetry around that type of thing?
Yes. So we have Power BI dashboards running on our GitHub repos, the docs repos, and we have recently built a revamped dashboard for the content people so that they can also individually go and look at their content areas and filter by their usernames on the areas that have high CSAT or like high traffic but low CSAT, and that's the area that they are being asked to focus on. If I go to the developer guide and I'm looking at the dashboard right in front of me, the landing page actually gets the maximum page views for us, because whenever people search for Dynamics 365 developers, they get routed to our landing page, and that kind of gives them a very nice map of where to go and find our web services, our client scripting documentation, or how to achieve things using plugins, apply business processes against those. So for the last month, we had 82,140 page views basically of that content. The second most favorite topic for users is basically downloading tools from NuGet. That gets the second most hit in the last month. It's almost 50,000 hits that we got in the last month. The other areas that get a lot of hits are subscribe to SDK assembly, query data using the web API. Using the web API, obviously, because that's the modern way of doing things in Dynamics 365. Also using how to various types of Dynamics 365 web services and client API documentation are some of the highly visited content that we have in the developer space.
Excellent, excellent. So another thing I noticed recently, that help inside Dynamics 365 points to docs now. What was the thinking behind this? Is that kind of remove contextual help that we've had in the past within the applications?
Yes. So because it's an online product, what we thought was that, pointing to the online documentation, which is always latest, is the best thing to do, rather than coordinating with the product team and shipping that content as a package to them that they can upload to the instance wherever is such a stale way of doing things. So yeah, when you click that thing, you always get pointed to the online documentation, which is the latest documentation. And assuming that, because our focus was so much on CRM Online for the last 2 years, we assumed that people who are accessing online will always have access to internet, so getting to the online documentation shouldn't be a concern. And we haven't really had any concerns. I haven't heard any feedback against that approach.
Yeah. Okay. It's interesting. So another question I have is around, how do you choose what format to write a doc in? And what I mean by this is, do you choose to create a step-by-step? Do you choose to add in screenshots or images? Do you choose to even add video? Or is it purely just you try to dump everything into text because it's like search rich? But how do you see that? Like in the next 5 years, we see, statistically video consumption's going through the roof. People are wanting to digest information with a quick show how, if you like, on screen. Or do you see that you're going to have to create multiple content types for the different types of consumption habits?
So video is great. I personally love YouTube videos, 5-minute videos to get things done, and I like that. The only flip side to a video is that it quickly becomes outdated for products like ours, where we are in such an agile mode, where we are introducing new features, changing things around. And video production is a costly thing here, because we just cannot put out any video outside as a Microsoft company. It has to have a standard set of sample data and has to be shot in a very professional manner. So it's not like I can do a screencast, capture that video, and just put it on as an official employee of Microsoft. I can do that in my personal capacity. That's the reason videos are so costly. Coming to how we document a feature, we try to provide certain minimal things in the documentation. First, the concept. What is that feature about? How does it help you? Second, how do you go about using that feature? And third, if that is a developer feature, we try to provide you samples. It can be broken down into separate topics. and it can be into a single topic that is dependent on the time and the stuff that the writer gets to write about that topic. Obviously, over time, as we see more interest in that topic, and if we see feedback that, hey, we have some missing information or the information is not complete, we obviously go back and try to beef it up. But to start with, it's always conceptual, step by step, samples, and if it's an end user or customizer documentation, we try to put screenshots that help the user.
And reference, of course.
And
one of the challenges, of course, is references. You can't write it all out by hand most times, and so trying to get an automated way. We depend on some of the shared infrastructure with the publishing platform to generate, say, the reference content for the SDK assemblies, and different ways of getting reference information is essential. And I think the client API is the only thing that has to sort of be written by hand these days.
Yeah, we also have reference documentation for REST API. For example, Online Management API has this documentation generated based out of a swagger.json file.
Excellent. So what when you're getting requests for documentation, people can't find something, I don't want to know the detail, but what at a high level are the common areas that you're getting the most doc requests, as in for content to be created at the moment?
So for our area, I see constant requests to create documentation, like provide samples for the reference content. For example, client API. People want samples for each of the client API methods that we have documented, which is a valid ask, and we are working in that direction. People are also looking for information around this confusion around Dynamics 365 and Power Apps. For example, when Power Apps and Dynamics 365 came together, they took this external platform and reimagined that as a CDS for apps. So people want a little more explanation in that area, and we are trying to bridge that gap again. And we also have a release notes basically that comes out. People want a little more information in the feature areas that have released. So those kind of requests we keep getting.
Yeah, I mean, for example, one of the things that I'm working on right now is we need to provide people with better guidance about how to write plugins that work in a performant way with the online services. This is a frequent area where when people report issues, the root cause can be determined to be a plugin that doesn't follow the guidance that we have. So, we're trying to, make it easier for people to discover, the best way to implement the guidance that we have. The guidance we have, I think, is not detailed enough, doesn't provide enough examples, and we need to do more to elaborate on the best practices and how people can test their assemblies and make sure that this is going to not cause any problems downstream. Yeah.
Excellent. I tell you, one of the things that I know a bunch of MVPs are very happy about in regards to docs in recent times is that you mention, some of the community-based tools like the XRM Toolbox, Ribbon Workbench, things like that, now on docs, which has kind of never happened in the past. And I tell you, it's definitely a big kudos thing to so many of those people to see their products now mentioned up there, where they're really helping the community as well.
Yeah, I think that, for example, you talked about areas that get a lot of hits. And, one of the areas that doesn't get a lot of hits, but we still have to publish it, is some of the ribbon reference documentation. Because, if you use the tools we provide, which is nothing, then you're composing the XML and modifying this and uploading it. And very few people do that as soon as they discover Scott Duro's Ribbon Workbench. So, the fact that Scott read through all that documentation and reference and created tooling that allows people to create their ribbons, it's an essential part of the success for the product. So we need to point people to it. But I think the problem is that, as writers, we're not out implementing it day to day. We're not necessarily having a need for the plugin tracelog viewer, but recognizing that those are providing good features, we want to lead people to them so that they're not struggling.
Yeah, excellent. Is there a way to subscribe to docs, like, like an RSS, or can I just get the delta, the changes? So, I could imagine in my inbox in the morning, for a few of us, we wouldn't mind seeing, oh, look at that, that's changed, read up, and it just kind of keeps us abreast of the changes and stuff going on. Is there any type of functionality like that?
I have proposed this, and we opened up a ticket with the shared services team to make this available. I think, as somebody who does get notifications every time it changed, I think you would quickly put it in your junk box, because it's impossible to keep track of all of the changes that happen every day as people make changes on the repo. It is a lot of noise.
I second Jim on that. Yes, definitely.
Choice, people, choice. Power to the people. Give them choice.
But, we have had, in the past, we were able to try and say, hey, here are the big changes coming in this release. But now the releases are coming all the time. And so it's really
stuff's
difficult.
Happening weekly, fortnightly.
Yes.
It's,
So we're just trying to keep the docs up to date, and it would be nice to be able to say, hey, here's a change. But we do have the release notes, which at a high level tell you, what's coming.
Yeah. What would be really nice, and a simple way to do it would be if you were logged in and you could, you're reading or an authenticated user in Docs, and if it just, from the last time you viewed the page, if it just did that like light yellow background to the text lines that, made kind of Web 2.0 famous, that just highlighted, then the next time you acted at the page, it'd just be normal, black text on a white background. It would just give you, although it's probably not user-friendly, right? So...
Well, if you want to clone the repo, and then you've got a local copy of it on your machine, then you can, GitHub provides all of the diffing capabilities to see what's new. So, generally I just pull down the latest changes and synchronize, but I bet there's got to be a way, if you really want to get into it, to look at all the individual changes as a diff between the original repo.
Yeah. Okay, so a little challenge to the community out there. There's a little project that Jim has just lined up that you want to get your teeth dirty or, whet your appetite on something like this for the community. Go ahead. How are docs, how often are they updated, or how often is new content going out? Are we talking about multiple times a day, a couple of times a week, or, monthly? What's the frequency? Just ballpark.
Yeah, I think it's daily gets updated. We have a huge team of writers working on docs, and as we get issues, we resolve issues, we get new feature information. We have a system that enables them to publish on their wish, on demand, basically. So I can't give you a figure, but I will say the docs are updated daily. Yeah,
that's fine. That's exactly what I was looking for, kind of like, a bit of a feel for frequency.
Often multiple times in a day.
Yeah.
Is there anything we've not discussed about docs? We're going to get into some quick-fire questions to wrap up shortly, but is there anything else that you'd just like to add that it would be valuable for the community to know about docs?
So I would like to speak a little bit about the technical writer and the technical writing profession here, and this is in relation to docs. So we as writers for CRM are trying to learn things and write to the best of our abilities. We are definitely not going out and implementing things there. So, we actually look forward to feedback and community blog posts that I read so often, MVPs, basically the emails that you send as a source of information, and try to roll it back into our documentation. Jim, for so many times, has forwarded me threads saying that, hey, this is interesting, you might want to pull that into this topic and there. So I would say continue doing that. That's a huge help to us, because you guys are actually going out in that market and trying to implement things for our products, and we're really thankful, and you're sharing that knowledge back with us and the community. I can only say we're really thankful for this.
Awesome. Jim, anything else?
Well, yeah, and it's true. I have a network. The MVPs are great to raise awareness. There are things that slip past, and they say, hey, is this still true? And then we look at it and go, no, it isn't. Okay, that needs to get fixed. There's a lot of stuff, and more eyes on it, the better. And, in terms of the docs, we're doing the best we can, but there's always room for people to go a step further. We are, I don't know if I'd say hindered, but we do have the extra burden or requirement that, whatever we publish is the, official supported word. So we're very careful not to speculate or imagine or we get everything verified and we do our fact checking. And that does take a bit more time.
Yeah, no, and that makes sense. It's become a mammoth product from when you first started, Jim, right?
Yeah.
As in it used to be, one product changed every 3 years, back in the day. And now, it's just a phenomenal, piece of technology. So it's no surprise if you like there's going to be some gaps from time to time, but it's good that the community have a method to feed back and provide input that is taken on board and, updated as needed. Okay, so quick fire question times, guys. So I've got 5 questions and just take turn about answering, or whoever answers first, course, the second person gets the hindsight of getting a little bit more time to think. But what books, blogs, or podcasts do you recommend most to people and why? In fact, these don't have to be anything around dynamics or business. These can just be, anything more personal if necessary. Jim, you're up first.
Okay, it's interesting because I just got into podcasts this past year and listening to them as I drive back and forth to work, when I'm going to sleep at night. I listen to a lot of history podcasts, listen to the history of Rome, history of English language, and listen to history of Japan. A lot of history-based podcasts are kind of my thing. As far as books, I read a lot of science fiction, but spend a lot of time looking at, things related to CRM. I have to call out and mention Power Objects CRM book. That's something I'm always searching. When we update our content, I say, well, what are people saying about this? What exists out there today? And I constantly bump into the CRM book, and I admire their effort to do that. I always sort of look at it and go, damn it, I wish we should be doing that, or one thing or the other. But good on them for doing that. I run into Scott DeRoe's blog posts, and I'm always amazed at the insight that he derives. I don't think he has like a microphone in the dev room or anything, a hidden microphone, but he seems to be able to pull out a lot of depth out of just the product code. The CRM tip of the day, the training content put together by David and Julie Yak, and I keep bumping into Ben Hosking's The Hosk blog. He gets great SEO, and he always has sort of interesting items in there, so I tend to encounter those.
Excellent. Vivek, anything you want to add?
So yeah, I like reading a lot of technical blogs, not necessarily just limited to CRM, but in general about technology, geeky things, and CNN, Wired, those are the websites I visit often. CRM community blog I like a lot. All the MVPs, I do follow. I don't have any personal favorites, but I do do visit them. And there is one site called USD the Book that's done by Neil Parkhurst. I like that. That's a great source of learning about USD. So I do like that as well. But generally, I just keep looking for stuff, find something interesting, just go deep into it and read about it.
Nice. What's your favorite app and why? And I'm talking about apps that I'd find on your phone that's chewing the most battery power.
I was going to say VS Code, but that's not on my phone. I don't know. I use the phone mostly for email and reading news, but I if I'm going to sit down and I'm bored, I love to go to Google Earth and just sort of explore the world and see all the places that I have been or want to go.
Right, and for me, it will be Google News, basically. Again, you can set subjects, keywords, and it will just pull in news on that subject for you and keep pulling in data and giving you latest news on that. So I like Google News. For that matter, Apple News as well, but somehow I like Google News a little more.
Do either of you have kind of daily rituals that set you on the right path for a successful day?
So, yes, I'll go first. Of course, Jim would have his own. So I daily like to clean up my inbox. But in the last few weeks, I have not been able to do that. I check my reminders, calendars, basically for all the meetings and make sure that I don't miss out, even if Outlook doesn't give me a reminder. So I just am on that. And then I have a monthly task list for me. I don't make it weekly because I tend to not finish it, but I have a monthly thing, and I do try to follow up with people and try to get back to them or try to finish the tasks that I promised that I'll do in this month. So that's my kind of ritual.
Well, I've seen your inbox, Vivek, and I guess, for me, getting up and eating a good leisurely breakfast with a big cup of coffee is a daily ritual that I have.
Nice. And that's how you kick off your day.
Mm-hmm.
Excellent. What's the best purchase you guys have made under $100?
I just did it last week. It's a Google Home Hub. Actually, it was selling for $99. Typically, it's $150.
The
one with the screen?
Yes.
Yeah, it's awesome, hey? And I've got one myself.
Yeah.
I had a hard time thinking of something that I bought for under $100, and I would probably say a nice meal. Going out with the wife and having a nice meal, we can get that for under $100. That's great.
Yeah, and you should still be able to, right?
Yeah.
Who do you recommend as a guest on the podcast of future?
I was looking through some of the previous people, and obviously you had James Phillips, so I guess the next person would be Charles Lamanna.
Yeah, so he's booked, Stephen's booked, Ryan's booked, so I've got a few of them coming on.
So which Ryan?
Both of them.
Okay, good. So those are on my list. Other than that, I had Scott Durow. He has his own video series, but be a great person to hear.
As in, because we both live in London, since I've moved to London, I've caught up with him, and it's on the cards to do a podcast with him, without a doubt.
So I would also recommend Jonas Sterling. He's our general manager design, and he looks into the design for Dynamics 365 Power Apps, Flow, everything Power thing. I mean, he can be a great guest there. I mean, he can talk about the design language and some thinking that goes behind how to shape up the UI.
So this is did you say it's Jonas Sterling?
No, it's Jonah, Jonah, Sterling, Sterling.
Excellent. I would love to have a discussion on UI. That would be great. Hey, Vivek and Jim, it's been great to have you on the show. Before you go, if people kind of want to connect with you online, are you on Twitter, LinkedIn? What's the best way if people want to have a shout out to you?
I participate. There's a CRM. There's a Power Apps and CRM Facebook group that I tend to look at. I'm on LinkedIn. I have a Twitter account and a number of followers, but I don't post very much there.
Mm-hmm. Vivek?
Yeah, I have a Twitter handle called Vivek_MSFT, so I'll love to get some interaction there.
You've been listening to the Dynamics 365 Practice Show. Please consider subscribing to the feed on any great podcast player. Your host is Business Applications MVP Mark Smith, otherwise known as the NZ365 Guy. For show notes or discuss anything covered in this podcast, please go to nz365guy.com/50, and I'll catch you next time.